Just like more than a million other people, I was enjoying Preston Go's newest series. That is, until he did something that really crossed the line. So much so that YouTube got involved. I'm just kidding. His video temporarily got taken down because he walked on a bridge. He sorted that out with YouTube and handled the situation very well. Either way, his goal was to get his truck on this bridge, which didn't pan out. But I still think there's a way that we can make that happen. Preston lives in California, where shelf space can be a little expensive, so I went with this base so that he can hang it on a wall if that works best for him. This video is a part of a series where I recreate my favorite YouTube projects and gift them to the original creator of that project. I've already connected with Preston and shown it to him. Stick around to the end of the video to see his full reaction. I pretended to use my pencil to take down the basic shape of the bridge and transfer it to the phone, which is mostly a half-moon shape, which is probably why it was given the name Half-Moon Trestle. I'm not going to be recreating it exactly to scale, but it will be close enough that it should at least register as a railroad trestle from a distance. The bridge bridges a large gap between two mountainsides, which you can see me carving here on some styrofoam, which is the perfect material to keep the weight down. After carving those to the depth of the shelf, I did some final touch-ups and it was time to assemble the track. I went to my local hobby store looking for some flex track, which would have made this part easier, but they didn't have it, so I grabbed some N-gauge tracks with a curve that looked about right. If you'll remember from my Desert Railroad video, I tried pushing these rail connectors together using my fingers, and I stopped doing that because one of them went under my nail. Thankfully, I discovered the value of needle nose pliers because of that event. Because I used these regular track pieces, there were some unsightly gaps between the sections that I patched up with equally sized twigs of basswood, which will all but disappear with a coat of paint. Once the foam had been glued down, I added some organic variation to the terrain using a butane torch. After that, it was time to throw on some Sculptamold. I grabbed a handful of the mix, which half of fell on the floor as I was putting it in the mixing cup, and I mixed up as many batches as I needed to cover the foam fully. I used a little less water than recommended to help it dry just a little bit faster. After the foam had been fully coated, the next step was to start constructing the trestle bridge, starting by widening the platform on either side of the tracks, making it much safer to walk on, and less likely to trigger the all-seeing eye of the Community Guideline Sentinel.
Must follow my directive.
The next step was to give the track some elevation. I measured out the height of the vertical support beams in 3 places and made sure that they were all at the same height. This was very finicky, but worked better than I had expected. I then attempted to count all of the vertical support beams in my reference photo, and quickly realized that I didn't have enough long pieces of basswood to match the bridge exactly, so I'll just be adding vertical pieces until I run out. When I pick out things to make on this channel, I usually intentionally avoid projects that require me to do one thing meticulously over and over and over. It's one of the reasons that I still enjoy making dioramas on a weekly basis. But I did make an exception for this project, and I did actually enjoy it. And speaking of monotony, I used 3,000 match heads to blow up a Razor Crest model kit, which means I have 3,000 matchsticks to use. I used less than 100 on this project, which probably means I need to take on more monotonous tasks if I ever want to be rid of them. And I thought this would be a good time in the video to answer the question, yes, I am sick again. But aren't we all? After a few hours of work, the bridge was finally constructed. I did construct it while the Sculptamold was still wet in order to help secure it in place. But now I need to wait for that to dry. While I do, I can make a truck. A tiny white truck with wheels that fit on train tracks. And I have just the thing for that. I thought about quitting the entire project because of the struggle that it was to get those wheels out of that bag, but I remembered the words on Preston's new merch line, and that helped me keep going. In the end, I didn't actually need those wheels for anything, other than to ensure that everything was the right width, which I could have just done with calipers. After transferring the basic shape of the truck onto some 040 styrene, I grabbed a nice new X-Acto blade and began slicing. This part of the build might have been my favorite. I love working with styrene in the first place, and I've never made a little truck like this in 1:150 scale. I haven't made a truck like this in any other scale either, but that's aside the point. I've entertained the idea of having a little mobile crafting setup at some point. I thought maybe one of these trucks might be an option. And I don't know how tall Preston and Mo are though, but seeing how close their knees are to the dash, it may not be the most practical. Pretty much everything on this truck was made from scratch except the luggage that I threw in the bed. Those were all bits and pieces that I found in my bits box. The luggage was the last thing to add, and I'm genuinely happy with how this turned out. By this time, the base was fully dried, but before moving on, I sanded down the sides so they were nice and even. That way, applying the wooden veneer will be a little bit easier later on. The next step was to prime and paint, and while I do that, I'd like to give a huge shout out, as always, to my patrons. After the zenithal highlight, I did pretty much all of the painting on the bridge with an airbrush. I have a distaste for that tactile sensation of painting wood with a brush, for some reason. When the bridge was in a good spot and I was happy with the color, I decided the easiest way to paint the ground around the supports was to use some pigment powders. I can spread this stuff around and tease it into position without it getting on the supports themselves, and then I can activate everything with isopropyl alcohol. The next step was to add some greenery, or in this case, more like Yellowry. I'm using drone footage from Preston's video for the color palette for this Idaho in the fall look. After applying the static grass to the hill on the left, I moved to the right side. I applied what will look more like a blanket of pine needles underneath where the trees will be. Speaking of trees, recently in a video I talked about a good way of making easy miniature pine trees. And if you need a lot of them all at once, a good method is just to go to the store and buy them. And jokes aside, from a cost-benefit analysis, sometimes it is just easier to go buy pre-made trees rather than spend 6 hours making them yourself. With the trees in place, I could add some final touch-ups with the airbrush to get the colors just right, and then one little deciduous tree for good measure. At this point, I was happy with how the base was looking, and it was time to move over to painting the truck. I know it may seem a little goofy to take a white truck, paint it fully black, and then paint it white again, but this way it will have a little bit of natural shading. After the coat of white, it was just a matter of going back and picking out the individual details with a brush. After painting the colors on, especially in the bed of the truck, there seemed to be a little bit of a lack of contrast, so I came back with a pin wash and I fixed that. With Preston's truck done, the last thing we needed was a little Preston and a little Mo. For that, I jumped over to Hero Forge. You won't be able to tell in the end because they're just too small, but I did try to make them look like Preston and Mo sitting extremely carefully and responsibly on the edge of a bridge. I printed the miniatures in 3 sizes, and technically the ones on the left are N-gauge, but they're too small for the truck. The ones on the right are a little too big for the truck, which means the remaining one, just like Baby Bear's porridge, was just right. I gave the miniatures a quick prime of black and then slapped on the colors. I added a wash to bring out those details, and Preston and Mo were ready to go. I then brought back the base one more time to apply the finishing touches. To supplement the adhesive that comes on the back of the veneer, I used a bead of foam-safe superglue to keep those edges nice and tight, and then trim that down to match the profile of the landscape. Instead of painting the sides black like I usually do, I decided to give them a maple stain instead. With the sides all cleaned up, it was time to glue everything in place. Whether it's a tiny, frustrating Ziploc baggie or a giant pile of rocks keeping you from completing your dreams, just remember what Preston says and keep going. And then when you've reached your destination, remember to call it good. What's up, dude?
Dude, what is up? I'm so excited. Is there anything I need to know before I see it?
I don't think so. I think I hope you like it.
See.
I'm gonna flip the camera around now.
Bro, no way. The truck. Oh, and there we are sitting. Oh, you're kidding. No way. The logo. Bro, this is like the coolest gift anyone has ever given me.
Your series was just awesome, and so I was like, you know what? His truck didn't make it, but we can fix that. Yeah, man.
Gosh, I can't wait to show this to Mo. He's gonna freak out.
I'll pack it up and ship it out ASAP.
Bro, I cannot wait. Can you send me photos of it too?
Yeah, of course. I'll send you photos.
Like
That's awesome. Heck yeah, dude. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't already seen Preston's series, definitely go watch that and subscribe to him while you're at it. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.